This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a website or a domain, head to squarespace.com. Why in 2025 is the digital single lens reflex camera, aka the DSLR, making a comeback even after being phased out nearly a decade ago? Well, if I could go back to when I brought my first camera, I would start photography on a DSLR. Not just for the obvious cost savings, but because of how a camera with so many limitations can make you a way better photographer in a shorter amount of time. And also, these cameras are just straight up fun to use. So the first reason why I think these DSLRs are still fantastic in 2025 is you're forced to get it right in camera. We know that a DSLR are not superior to mirrorless when it comes to things like dynamic range, which enables you to bring every single bit of detail back in the shadows and highlights in Lightroom. But the problem is this HDR approach doesn't look great. This causes you to lose the natural contrast fall off, particularly in the blacks and the whites of an image. DSLRs also force you to nail exposure and composition. Our eyes are drawn to the most contrasty and the brightest part of an image, and having the skill to capture this in an intentional way is a true art. And you don't need the latest and greatest camera to do this. In terms of autofocus, of course you're at a disadvantage compared to mirrorless with its advanced continuous eye or subject autofocus algorithms. But let's be honest, not everything should be shot wide open, and pro photographers understand hyperfocal distance, which is a calculation for your focal plane. Pro photographers understand when to close down a lens for a greater depth of field and when to open it up for a shallower depth of field. Take this example I shot around when I first started photography. This image was shot on the Canon 85mm f1.2 wide open, and this image is ridiculous as the entire face of this portrait is out of focus except for the focal point being the eyes. Or when I shot this landscape image of Mount Fuji at f2.8. This photo still haunts me to this day, as I just wish I shot it at f8 or f11 to get the foreground sharp, because I now know that around that f-stop on a 24mm lens gives me about 1 meter to infinity in focus, meaning that this foreground and the subject would be tack sharp. Now, I don't do this calculation manually anymore. It's 2025 and we have fantastic apps like PhotoPills or even just this depth of field graph that I keep as a field note. Like for example, these images shot at around f5.6 on a 35mm lens. This maintains both subjects are in focus while having a pleasing out of focus background. So I think as photographers we've gotten lazy, and that's completely fine, I get that. But if you want to really improve your photography, having limitations is a huge shortcut to getting better, just like how a prime lens can do. And on the topic of lenses, you don't have to fork out $2,000 for a new lens, as the current cost savings of DSLRs is out of this world. With everyone now moving to mirrorless, DSLR bodies and the lenses are super affordable right now, making them accessible and ideal for beginners, but advocates are now making the switch back to make photography fun and also more affordable. Like for example, this almost 20-year-old Canon 5D Classic was only $300 AUD on eBay. But some better examples and recommendations I believe is the Canon 6D or the 5D Mark II. Both are full frame around 20 megapixels, plus these two lenses, which are fantastic by the way, would bring the total amount for a full professional photo kit under $1,000 USD. Or the Nikon D700 is another popular option. It does have no video capability, so that's a bit of a con, and it's only a 12 megapixel full frame, but it's got this cult-like following for the impressive autofocus and the burst frame rates. So the Nikon D700 with a 35mm and 85mm f1.8 would be under that $1,000 mark. Now guys, jump on this sooner than later as the prices are rising. These classic cameras are becoming incredibly popular, just like film cameras were a few years ago. And I would avoid the APS-C versions as the full frame cameras and lenses are much better and there's not much of a price difference as well. But does spending more on newer mirrorless systems have the benefits of more image quality? Well, this is where things get quite interesting, as DSLRs still deliver incredible image quality, especially for genres like portraiture, street, and landscape photography. We've talked about dynamic range earlier, but cameras like the Nikon D700 was really one of the first DSLRs that let you recover a ton of shadow detail, similar to a modern mirrorless camera. But guys, in all honesty, I've actually been really enjoying editing the photos from my Canon 5D Classic with its limited dynamic range. The detail retained in the highlights and the white point compared to the blacks and the shadows, along with the beautiful roll off into the midtones, is very reminiscent of film. And a lot of people do think that 12 megapixel isn't enough for photography, but I completely disagree. All the photos shown in today's video, even the 33 megapixel full frame Sony files, are being shown at the same size because a typical 12 megapixel full frame image is over 4,000 pixels wide, much larger than 4K. Most of my commercial work ends up being exported at around 5 megabytes anyway, which gives my JPEGs roughly about 2,000 pixels wide, which is more than enough for online use, and most platforms compress well below that anyway. Color size is a huge talking point in the DSLR community. Cameras like the Nikon D700 have great in-camera profiles and JPEGs, but you can always just tweak the color calibration and the vibrance to get that D700 look while editing the raw files in Adobe Color. So yeah, I think image quality is highly debatable. Things like no autofocus, continuous eye and subject tracking is a disadvantage, but if you get it right on camera, you're golden. Now, when I was in Melbourne shooting these portraits, I sat down with my good friend Matt Ruderman, who's not like me. He actually started to shoot on a DSLR, moved to mirrorless, and now he's getting back into shooting and collecting DSLR cameras again. But before we sit down and hear what he has to say, I just want to quickly thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that helps you build a beautiful, professional website that works for you. I've been using Squarespace for years to run my wedding photography site, creativeweddingco.au, and it's still my best performing lead generator. It ranks on Google, it's easy to update, and looks great on any device. Squarespace has also added some cool stuff lately, like an AI-powered builder that helps you design a full site in just a few clicks. And if you're selling prints, taking bookings, or building your own personal brand, it's all built in. Sponsorships help me make more videos just like this one. So go to squarespace.com to start a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/GerardNeedham to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And again, thank you Squarespace for sponsoring today's video and supporting the channel. Alright guys, so this is my friend Matt Ruderman, and he actually learned photography on a DSLR.
Yes, so the camera I actually started shooting on was the one that you're holding right now, the 5D Mark, well not that actual one, but the 5D Mark 1 was my very first camera, and I have a bit of a soft spot for them. I do really like them. I think they're very good cameras. Just DSLRs in general I think are fantastic.
Do you think a beginner photographer should buy one of these because they're cheap?
I think, well look, I mean they are cheap. I don't think that that's the only reason that a beginner photographer should buy one. I think that a camera like the 5D Mark 1 or the D700, like the one that I've got here, is a very good camera, but the reason that's good for beginners is they're obviously cheap, but also they're very high quality. Like the images that you can get out of these cameras, I think just because they're old doesn't mean that they're bad. And the lens selection that you have on DSLRs, like the Canon mount I think has almost 200 lenses, and Nikon F mount's almost 400 lenses.
Yeah, well, they're like 100, 200 dollars.
Oh, I mean this 28 2.8 that I've got on here is like a $250 lens. One of the best 28s I've ever used. So small, compact, and like this, it's awesome to learn on one of these because the limitations that you're going to experience will honestly make you a better photographer in the long run. I think they're really good, man. I think DSLRs are fantastic.
Alright guys, if you want to go check out Matt's channel, it's linked here and in the description down below. And cheers, man.
Thank you so much.
Been enjoying my time in Melbourne. So no camera is perfect, and a DSLR from the past is no exception. The first issue I encounter is the lack of live view exposure and depth of field preview. Unlike mirrorless cameras, DSLRs use an optical viewfinder, which doesn't show how changes to your settings affect exposure or depth of field in real time unless you press the depth of field preview button. So when you're using a DSLR, you're always stopping to check your exposure and the focus on the very low contrast and low detailed LCD screens. Some of the newer DSLRs do offer live view, but utilizing the LCD screen just slows down the autofocus dramatically. Generally, DSLRs also only offer single shot autofocus modes, or if they do have continuous autofocus, it's never really any good, while modern mirrorless cameras excel with continuous autofocus algorithms and also precise phase detection. When you use single shot autofocus, if the camera or the subject moves, the subject will gradually shift out of the focal plane until the shutter is pressed. Unlike continuous autofocus, which maintains focus on the subject throughout the shooting process, even at impressive burst rates. This Canon 5D Classic is also quite bulky and very heavy, taking up significant space and weight in my camera bag. Therefore, I would not recommend these cameras for travel or for situations when you want to be discreet, such as street photography in certain scenarios. But in contrast, they are incredibly ergonomical to hold. The mirror slap or the mechanical noise of the DSLR is very noticeable, making them less suitable for quiet environments such as wedding ceremonies. In contrast, modern mirrorless cameras with stack sensors often eliminate the need for a mechanical shutter at all. Another disadvantage is that very few DSLRs offer in-body stabilization or IBIS, making handheld shooting at slower shutter speeds challenging. Additionally, DSLRs have limited ISO capabilities. For instance, my Canon 5D here struggles beyond 1000 ISO, while many mirrorless cameras perform well above that 4000 ISO range. Some lenses like this 35mm feature stabilization built into the lens, which can help mitigate this issue, but landscape photographers may need to go back to using a tripod. So there are many disadvantages to DSLRs compared to modern mirrorless cameras, which just simplify the shooting process. For example, my Canon 5D Classic doesn't even have auto ISO, which has caused me issues as I primarily do shoot in aperture priority mode and I rely on as many automatic features as possible. But I do think that if you're in the position of picking up your first photography camera, these DSLRs are definitely a steal. They're going to make you a much better photographer. And if you are an experienced or professional photographer like myself, learning how to use these cameras has been a fantastic and enjoyable experience. They're relatively cheap to buy and you could potentially actually make a little bit of money from the resale value. If you appreciate my 35mm film editing style, my Lightroom presets are linked in the description down below and they work on all DSLRs and mirrorless camera brands and models. If you're concerned about achieving the best color from your DSLR, go check out this video I made on that topic. And if you're worried about the skin tones, be sure to check out this video right here. As always guys, thank you for watching and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now, enjoy the rest of your week.